Because that's the first thing, right? If we diagnose more kids as mentally ill, we can put them on the drugs.
Now we're branding these kids as defective in order to help, and that help is drugs.
And that's what's happened. It's a commercial enterprise that's happened. It's not a scientific enterprise.
Now they take this disease, this label, they give it to doctors, they give it to schools, and now they have an avenue to make money on it.
That's what happened. There was no explosion of kids misbehaving more than, you know, in past times or some sort of disease that was loose. It's a commercial enterprise. They identified the kids as a market in the same way that Coke might identify them as a market for soft drinks, and they've been very successful, incredibly successful.
And pharmaceutical companies love it. $69 billion, $130,000 a second is paid for these drugs to destroy the souls of our children.
Absent sound science, and with billions of dollars at their disposal, the drug companies introduced many campaigns aimed specifically at school children. Here they planted their seeds by using the most basic of childhood communication tools, the coloring book.
They have this little scenario of the kid whose friend moves away, and now Johnny's sad because his friend moved away, and Mom notices that Johnny's sad, and so Mom takes him to the doctor, and the doctor finds out that Johnny's been sad for days now and even weeks, and that he's going through some problems that the doctor may be able to help him with. So they put him on the whole story is to get the kid on a drug just because a friend moved away. Well, friends move away, dogs die, family members die. I mean, if you don't develop the coping skills as a child to take on the bigger, more real-life stresses and problems, it scares me to death to think about what this next generation is going to be like when they're faced with very real, serious problems. I don't think they're going to be able to handle it.
I was working in an adolescent residential facility with kids that were considered delinquent kids and health and welfare placed children. And every one of them at one point were distributed some sort of, psychoactive medication on a daily basis. How do we know how they're supposed to be when they're altered from very young ages? Their brains are still growing, they're still figuring out what kind of individual they want to be. So we're not even seeing the real person. They don't even know who they are.
It is really sad to me that we are not only risking the health and the brains of our kids, but we're disfiguring a large number of them and disabling some of them with these dreadful disorders. And all the doctor would have had to do, instead of listening to the guy from the drug company and the guy giving his seminar at the psychiatric meeting who was sent there by the drug company, all you have to do is read dopamine blocker. And he'd know, or should know, from basic medical school, it's going to produce that whole array of horrible disorders.
Some of the antipsychotics they're using may make children gain weight, may be a precursor to perhaps getting diabetes. Well, if it has such a profound effect on the physiological system, what effects is it having on brain development? Are we going to be able to tie certain types of problems, deficiencies, in terms of brain function with the use of these drugs on children early in life? We don't have the answer to those questions.
We do know that we are drugging our children earlier and more often than ever before. The United States consumes more than 90% of the world's methylphenidate, or Ritalin, after use of the drug was virtually dormant for decades. Then there is the startling 400% rise in the use of antipsychotic medications among children and teens. Are children really in need of these drugs? Or have parents simply lost their way?
What are we doing to our child when we give them Seroquel, Risperdal, Zyprexa, Malaril, or any one of these other drugs? These drugs impair the brain specifically by blocking the transmission to the frontal lobes of the brain. That's what makes us love and hate. It makes us prejudiced and generous. It makes us think abstractly. It gives us judgment. It's the human being. When you give one of those drugs, you reduce the personhood with these drugs even more profoundly than with the stimulant drugs. We disable their brains. It's a chemical lobotomy, and that's not a metaphor. That's a fact.
This, then, cannot qualify as free will, and we would be wise to understand it for what it is: a chemical manipulation of consciousness without regard for human life. As psychiatrists and their pharmaceutical allies make their play, as they lay claim to the biology of the brain, now and forever, we should pause, think, before we allow anyone to monopolize the most important medical market the world will ever know. After all, there is ample evidence in this age that for some at least, the roots of darkness may be triggered by the cure-alls they're being fed.
He didn't tell us. He went to the doctor. The doctor gave him some Prozac. Even if he had have told me, I wouldn't have known that Prozac could have been harmful. Then one night he took 2 Prozac tablets, and the next morning he stabbed me.
He stabbed you?
Yes, I was laid in bed reading. I'm blind on this side. He walked in and he stabbed me. Twice. I subdued him. As soon as I subdued him, it was just like switching a light off. He's changed, and he came back, and he was distraught at what he'd done. And that's when our trouble started.
And they wanted to charge him with attempted murder, and we didn't want to press charges. And then all this, it just ricocheted from there, and it was a downward spiral, and there was nothing for us to stop it.
He got put in a psychiatric hospital. They wouldn't accept that the Prozac had anything to do with it.
When that happened, again, you being a nurse and you being keenly aware of probably what goes on in places like that, what were your first thoughts as a mother?
Well, we're all doomed. I just thought we're doomed.
Jeanette Blackbro's maternal instincts were correct. Her son Christopher, after repeated beating at the hands of his supposed caregivers, committed suicide.
Where's your emergency? There's been a shot at Westside High School, middle school. Been what? There's been a shot at Westside Middle School. Okay. We need an ambulance as soon as possible. Okay. Do you know who done the shooting? No, we do not.
8 out of the 13 school shooters around the country, 8 of them were taking prescription psychotropic drugs. Now, you try to explain that these drugs don't create alterations in people's brains, making them capable of the unspeakable.
Unspeakable, yes, but the violence continues unabated. In Cleveland, Ohio, Asa Kuhn shot 4 teachers and students while under the influence of trazodone, an antidepressant, and clonidine, prescribed for ADHD. In October of 2007, Robert Hawkins killed 8 people at the Westroads Mall with Valium in his bloodstream. This evidence of violence as a side effect of psychiatric medication should come as no surprise. When John Hinckley Jr. shot President Ronald Reagan in 1981, he did so, according to his attorney, while in a Valium-induced stupor. It begs the question as to whether the drug Prozac had a similar effect on Jeff Weiss when he shot 14 people in 2005. Weiss was taking Prozac when he created this prophetic storyboard, one which foretold how his own life would end. Clearly, Weiss was more troubled than most. But his animations are still emblematic of the dark and violent conclusions too many normal children have also reached, while under the chemical haze of these mind-altering, powerful drugs.
Are we helping or harming the kids? As we turn them into consumers of psychiatric drugs, which is what we're doing, are we in essence sacrificing kids to that market? And that's the question our society should be really raising.
In our childhood, it is ingrained in all of us that we can be anything we wish. But perhaps we should be questioning whether that ethos still holds true. This modern debate about the brain, the mind, and even the soul of man is too important to ignore any longer.
We're having an emergency at Westside Middle School.
As a society of supposedly